Wallabies and Springboks, it's the rematch of last week's game. Last week was 2 points in it, 28-26. They're playing again. It's a short turnaround. They played on Sunday last week. It's Saturday this week. It's Suncorp Stadium. It's 7:05 here, local time in New Zealand. So I think it's a pretty early kickoff. This one, I think, technically the Wallabies are the home team. Last week they were the away team. But anyway, we're going to go through the squads, some of the changes that have been made since last week, some of the stats from the head-to-head last week as well. Maybe some key areas for both sides to work on, the predictions. And you guys can let me know your thoughts on how things are going to go. So the Wallabies got their first win in the Rugby Championship 2021 over the Springboks last week. So they are now kind of at least off the mark. The Springboks on the flip side have dropped their first game. So it's kind of the All Blacks who are clear at the moment at the front and the Pumas who are well at the bottom. So this match is going to kind of be an interesting one in terms of how the rest of the comp shakes up. Unless the Pumas can do everyone else a favour and pick up a win over the All Blacks, then this game's going to be pretty interesting. The lineups for this one, the Wallabies have made a few changes. Alan Alatoa has had to go back to his family. He's another one of like 5 or 6 players who've returned home for the birth of a child. It's incredible how many guys are having kids at the same time. So Ala Alatoa is not going to be with the squad for the rest of the competition. So it's Taniela Tupou who starts. There's been many calls for him to start for quite some time, but he's been riding the pine. I think he's only started once this year for the Wallabies. He's generally come on as that impact sub, but he does start. James Slipper also up from the bench, and Folau Fainga'a starts there at hooker, so he's the only guy of the front three that's a continuation on from last week. Rodda and Phillip are the continuation on from last week, though. That's the same second row, and Swinton, Hooper, and Valetini are the same back row. So in the forward pack, it's just the 2 props that are changed. Everyone else is pretty steady. Michael Hooper is going to become the most capped Wallabies captain of all time. This is his 60th time captaining the Wallabies, and he is by no means done with his career, man. He's going to set all kinds of records, surely, so big congratulations to him. It's an interesting back row, man, with Swinton kind of being that the mongrel guy, right? The enforcer or whatever it is, the guy who puts in a bit of niggle. Hooper, who's kind of, he's supposed to be a turnover guy, but he's never been like a David Pocock kind of turnover guy, but certainly through the breakdown tackling machine. And then Valetini is kind of big block busting, carrying number 8. So I do like the look of that back row. I think they can go pretty well, but I mean, you could name a secondary back row for the Wallabies based on guys who didn't get picked, and they'd still be pretty bloody good. They do have a lot of good loosies. Interestingly, Nick White gets the nod ahead of Tate McDermott. Tate McDermott, though, isn't on the bench. Remember, he did pick up a little bit of an injury in the first half last week, so maybe that's kind of what's kept him to the bench this week. But either way, it's a good chance for Nick White. Quade Cooper, funnily enough, continues on at 10 after his heroics last week, where he really played a quite controlled game. Kicked well from the tee, controlled the game well from number 10. Kerevi, though, is he's going under the radar a little bit. He's getting talked up a fair bit. Obviously, all the focus is on Quade Cooper with the goal kicks. But I don't think you can underestimate Samu Kerevi's impact on the game. He had a lot of carries, a lot of defenders beaten, a lot of passes set up a try. He's just an absolute danger, man. So his midfield partner, Ikitau, was maybe a little bit quieter. Maybe look to see a little bit more from him this week. Koroibete, Kellaway, and Banks are the same back three. Banks, man, I don't think he's in the greatest form, but Dave Rennie keeps defending him to say, he's doing the right thing. So I honestly have seen Tom Banks, play a lot better than he's played in 2021. I know he's got better potential, and Dave's certainly giving him the vote of confidence rather than kind of chopping and changing. I'd love to see someone else get a crack, but then again, as I said, I know Tom Banks can do better, so fingers crossed he has a good game and actually lights it up a bit. Maybe he takes a few more high balls, the contestable ones. He's been decent under the ones which are, pretty straightforward, the ones he should be getting, but some of the contestable ones have been a bit hairy, so fingers crossed he has a good one. Kaitu'u continues on as the reserve hooker, and he had a really good game last week. Big physical presence, so more of the same from him, please. Bell and Robertson are the prop replacements. Robertson comes into the squad with no Ala Alatoa. He's not played for the Wallabies for ages, so fingers crossed he also has a good game. Bell swaps to the reserve role. He got folded at least once by Malherbe last week, so maybe he'll be looking forward to facing off against Vincent Koch instead. But That's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen the other, really. Swain's in for Leota. He's recovered from a injury. Samu is still there. McDermott, like I mentioned, is on the bench, and Hodge and Petaia. So the only changes to the starting lineup are all bench replacements who are now starting. That's pretty much it. There's no kind of real fresh faces. The only ones are Robertson and Swain, who come into the bench rather than straight into the starting lineup. For the Wallabies, for the Springboks, they have also made kind of minimal changes, but they have made some changes. Inyakane comes in for Ox. Not a bad change, man. Inyakane proved in the Lions series that when he switched from tight head to loose head, he was still in proper scrummaging form. So looking forward to see how he goes up against Taniela Tupou. It's going to be a massive battle. Mbonambi and Malherba kind of continue on from last week, and both were pretty bloody solid up front, you'd have to say. Itzebeth is there alongside Marvin Ori because Lut Diacha is out with an injury, so I think it was concussion. So, Diacha, although he missed a few tackles, was kind of instrumental. He made some big ones and was big at line-out time, so Marvin Ori's got some pretty big shoes to fill. And Itzebeth, I don't know, man, was he a bit quiet last week? I'll have to go back and rewatch the game, but I feel like his impact on the game could have been more. He's such a big man, and he can make his presence felt a bit more. Anyway, you've got Kolisi still there, Mostert still there, Vermeulen still there at 6, 7, and 8. Vermeulen actually looked pretty solid on his return. Nobody's really talking about him because the focus has kind of been on the missed goal kicks from Andre Pollard and some other areas of the game. But Vermeulen, for a guy who's been out for such a long time, to step back into test level, I thought was pretty bloody good. Won a couple of turnovers, carried the ball pretty well, so kind of what you expect from him. De Klerk and Pollard are the same 19 combo, so there's been no knee-jerk reactions from Ninaba. He's kept the lineup pretty steady. Delina and Arm are still there, 12-13. Mapimpi and Corsi and LaRue, 11, 14, and 15, respectively. My old man is on at me for the Springboks to get their ball more to the backs every time he sends me a message, and we'll go through some of those stats in a tick, but kind of echo those sentiments a bit. My old man keeps saying they've got heaps of talent, but they're not using it. He may well be right, but we'll see how things go. If the game plan from last week is still implemented this week, will it kind of get the result that it could have got last week but didn't quite get over the line? Marks, Kitsoff, and Koch are the front row replacements. Kitsoff drops down from the starting lineup. Van Staden, Smith, Visa, Herschel Yankees, and Damien Willemse continue on. So it is pretty minimal changes. It's still the 6-2 split. They've kind of resisted the urge to bring on a backup goal kicker like a Mornay Stain, or an Elton Yankees. So it is Hondre who will need to kind of kick a wee bit better, and if Willemse comes on for him, likewise. What can we expect from the teams based on the tactics we saw last week? The maul from South Africa was clearly a big weapon, man. They had 12 out of 13 lineouts. That was their success rate, and 10 from 11 mauls. I haven't gone back to check the tape as to how many of those mauls were from lineouts, but I would imagine it is the majority. So in attacking territory, the Springboks are going to look to maul it up, and they got 3 tries that way last week. So if the Wallabies haven't been practicing maul defence, I'll be very surprised. But just because you practice to defend, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to stop it. But that's going to be a key weapon because it worked so well for them last week. Mbonambi 1 and Marks 2 in those tries. Maybe the Wallabies need to try and disrupt it in the air. Mostert was the jumper for 2 of those maul tries, so maybe he's a kind of key guy to mark up with. But then again, if you want to contest it in the air, you risk not being able to defend it as well on the ground. So it's kind of a bit of a coin toss for the Wallabies as to what they do. The Wallabies, on the other hand, had 13 out of 14 lineouts, but only the 2 mauls, so very different kind of set of tactics there. Penalties conceded for the Wallabies was a bit hairy, 17 to the Boks 11. So discipline will need to be better, because if you look at the goal kicking, the Boks were 4 from 8. So they missed a couple of conversions and a couple of penalties. So if you're going to give the Boks penalties, on most days they will punish you more than 4 from 8. Like Quade Cooper was 8 from 8. He was phenomenal. He's not, in my memory of Quade Cooper, he's not usually that radar accurate, but he was not looking like missing anything in that game. Whereas Willemse with 1 and Pollard with 3, a wee bit off. So Boks need to kick better. Wallabies need to get their discipline better. That's the kind of long story short. Defensively, both sides had pretty good numbers, man. The Wallabies' defense was ironclad, 94%, made 74 out of 79 tackles. How many clean breaks did the Springboks get? 0. Not a single one. When the Wallabies were playing the All Blacks over those 3 games, they averaged 13 clean breaks conceded. The Springboks didn't manage a 1. Now, the Springboks' tactics aren't really lending themselves to creating a heap of clean breaks. When they played the Pumas, I think they got 5 clean breaks across 2 games, but at least they got some. Against the Wallabies last week, not a single one. Likewise, defenders beaten numbers, man. The Wallabies had 21, which is kind of upper end of their normal end of the spectrum. Against the All Blacks, they would usually get in the teens or maybe 20s against the All Blacks, beating some tacklers. So that's pretty good effort from them, whereas the Boks had 5. Again, that kind of reflects in the Wallabies tackle numbers. The Wallabies tackle numbers are astronomically high. The Springboks usually beat more defenders than that, right? It's bizarre. Wallabies defense really manned up. So, yeah, that's going to be key areas for both sides. Can the Wallabies defense continue to operate at that high level, or will the Springboks attack pick it up? It's going to be a good question. The decision-making, you look at Faf de Klerk, he's a key man for the Boks, and Tate McDermott, who's now on the bench. It's going to be Nick White, but kind of key guys for both sides. The way they play the game has been different. Like Faf, 70% of the time he is passing it, 5% he's running it, and 25% he's kicking it. So about a quarter of the time, if Faf gets the ball, you can expect him to kick it. Whereas for the Wallabies, it's more like 12.5% of the time off 9 anyway. So very kind of different style. The Wallabies are passing it a bit more, running it a bit more, kicking it a bit less, but that's kind of what we've seen from the way the teams play just generally. So it's interesting. Nick White managed to kick one of those 50-22s as well. So whether both sides adapt a bit more for that is going to be another one to watch. Also, like I mentioned, the outside backs kind of not getting the ball. Last week, the Wallabies wingers, Kellaway, 4 runs, 32 metres, 4 defenders beaten, gets a try. Pretty busy guy. Koroibete, 8 runs, 30 metres, 6 defenders beaten. Pretty busy guy, right? The Boks wingers on comparison were pretty starved. Nkosi, 2 runs, 10 metres. And Mapimpi, 1 run, 9 metres, and 2 defenders beaten. Get that man the ball, please. Please get him the ball. That's a pretty good effort for 1 run. But yeah, just not enough opportunities. But yeah. Anyway, we'll see, folks, whether last week's performance has much bearing on this week. Remain to be seen. The Boks certainly will be looking to bounce back with a victory, but that Suncorp factor for the Wallabies, it could be one. I had a look at the record from when they're in Brisbane. They've beaten the Boks in 2016, the Italians in 2017, New Zealand in 2017, Ireland in 2018, South Africa again in 2019, New Zealand again in 2019, New Zealand in 2020, France twice in 2021. The Wallabies record in Brisbane at Suncorp is phenomenal. It's a fortress. So they are certainly not going to make it easy for the Springboks. It could be another close one. The average across the last 5 games, which at the moment is evenly split, 2 wins each and a draw. The average is 26-21 to the Springboks, but a few of those points being clocked up in games that were played in South Africa. This one is in Australia, like I mentioned, at Suncorp. That being said, the bookies have still got the Boks by 7, and the Rugby Forecast algorithm also has the Boks but by 6. Should be a pretty fascinating one, folks. I'm very much looking forward to it. The Wallabies, much needed win last week. It's really got things looking a bit brighter for them. The Springboks certainly got a bit of a bloody nose, but they'll be looking to fight back. So which one do you reckon gets it done, guys? A bounce back victory for the Springboks or the Wallabies to really put down a marker? Should be fascinating either way. You guys let me know your thoughts. Key players, how do you reckon it's going to pan out? And if you got this far through the video, 14 minutes, feel free to leave it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.